what does that terrain look like? What's going to take for you to get up that mountain? But before you begin, you're going to have to understand, where am I in my beginning? And where are my baselines in order for me to know which path I'm going to take to get up there, and what's it going to take to make it? So, Joanny, when we started talking about, it's actually about a year ago today, right? Like around this time, I told you about this mountain we're going to climb, and you're going to have to climb on. And we talked about a baseline. What was your baseline at the point? Where were your challenges, and what were you trying to do?
Well, what I was trying to do was just make it out there. I was just on that survival mode of figuring out myself and how can I fit into the community. And that's where community was big for me, and just kind of networking through that. But the challenge was, how do I make my community more on the quality side instead of the quantitative side? So instead of having a lot of networking friends, just maybe a core group that I can rely on and count on.
That's good. So you're assessing that you at least had friends that can help you out to that path. You might not have known how to leverage your friends, but you were just trying to like survive through 2019, right? 2020 was a much more challenging year, people would say. If you're just barely surviving through 2019, how did you feel like you would actually thrive as you saw these challenges coming across in 2020?
Honestly, 2020, I just had that positive mind of like, okay, new year, new me, maybe I can just redo it again. But that's where with 2020, I realized it is more on my core side to be around people and
Mm-hmm.
helping them achieve their future aspiration and goals. So that's where I wanted to focus more on the people side of things instead of growing my own personal business.
It's awesome, right? And so once you had an idea of what your summit looked like and how you wanted to get there, you had to make some difficult choices, maybe like some things that you were going to do, and continue to do with some discernment and some intentionality. But there are some things that you were not going to do anymore. And because you had done it accidentally, hoping for a certain result. What were some of the things that you realized that you were not going to do anymore?
I realized I wasn't going to try to be somebody that I'm not. So I try to, in a sense, do all my research and the data first. And that's where I realized that's not really who I am. I'm more on the people side of the business. So trying to balance that too was a little bit on the challenging side because I was more for the people than I was for the profitability of the business.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. And by the way, this is like Joanny does not have a script. She doesn't know what questions I'm going to ask her. I told her as we go through this presentation, I thought what would be great is for the listeners to actually understand what type of thoughts and questions I ask her. And for each one of you, you can feel free to listen in, answer the questions as if you were kind of traveling with her, and feel free to ask questions in the chat box. You know, we do want this to be very interactive. You've already introduced yourselves. If you haven't, feel free to go ahead and do so. But chat with each other. You know, I see the props. Love what Richard and Chris are talking about. You know, just how far she's come. And again, you know, the idea wasn't to highlight Joanny, but it's to highlight how we can be more intentional with the things that we do by understanding what our baselines are. So I'm going to pair everybody up. This could be a little scary, but the idea is I want you to take what Joanny just went through and think about it for yourself. What are two goals for 2021 that you didn't achieve in 2020? Now, some of you might be like, oh, new year, new goals, forget it. I'm not going to even do it. But, you know, one of the things that we would be fools of doing is try to do the same things in 2020 to succeed in 2021. And realistically, if you try that, it probably won't be successful. It's that definition of insanity, trying to do the same things over and over again, expecting a different result, right? So let's take a moment. You're going to have some people paired up with you. There might be 3 in some rooms, depending if you're like Jennifer, you already have somebody in your room physically, or there might be an odd number of people. But take a moment and think about what are some things that you're going to do differently. And then we'll circle back around in about 5 minutes and have an opportunity for you to at least come with some ideas that you've shared with, and then use that as a lens to continue our conversation. Okay, so we'll see you in a little bit, and then we'll talk. All right. Was there something that you heard from somebody in your group that you paired up that you thought was actually a really good answer in terms of how they're working smarter, not harder for 2021? Anybody got an example they want to share?
Yeah, Jeff, you have a great fitness routine. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. My fitness routine is I'm doing the 30-day challenge with my kids. It's a whole family activity. So every day since the New Year's, we've done 30 push-ups, 30 sit-ups, 30 crunches, 30 jumping jacks. And so of that 30-day challenge, we did it January 1st, so now it's January 20th.
Mm-hmm.
So we're almost there. And I really like what Hogan's doing. He's like, why don't you just do it for the whole year?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna propose that challenge. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. And how would you say, Jeff, that is working smarter, not harder at the goal?
It's just taking one small step a day that doesn't take up too much of your time,
Mm-hmm.
and then doing it consistently, and you could see the results. And so just the ideal of just instead of taking one huge step, which takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of commitment, why not just do a small step and then see where it goes, but doing it consistently, and then doing it with a group, a team, a family. That's how I believe it's being, smarter.
Good, good. And we're going to talk a little bit more explicitly about what are different preferences that people have. Some of you might naturally want to step into things a little bit more intentionally and do it step by step. Some of you like, hey, I'm all in, right? If I'm going to go big or go home. And those are preferences on different styles. And that might be a baseline that you could actually see yourself in how you like to operate. Your baseline might be where in the past you failed and you might not realize it's because I go big or go home. And I don't take the time to maybe go through things a little bit more incrementally, measure things out, make sure I have enough bandwidth or resources to be able to accomplish a task. Then you might want to say, hey, maybe my baseline preference is one way to do things, but maybe I need to incorporate some of the opposite way in order for me to be successful. And then that, again, would be an option, a way to look at being smarter, not harder. I say most people tend to work harder at their roles and their goals because they do things the way they want to do it. But you're not working smarter if you actually do it the way maybe someone completely the opposite of you and how they do it, right? Because I don't think there's one way of being able to achieve goals. There's multiple ways. Your goal has to be, can you do it different ways that different people would want to do it so that you have the best option of achieving your goals? And so as we go through today, that's what we're going to talk about, is like understanding what your baselines are. And what are those implications of those biases? For Jeff, the implication of his bias to want to go big or go home meant that he wasn't going to have fitness, and it wasn't going to be something that his whole family has buy-in on. But now that he's realized, hey, if I do things a little differently and I do it more incrementally with my whole family in a way that's methodical, I think we can all celebrate and go through that together. And that might be something that energizes him. We'll be able to lead ourselves then and others more intentionally by understanding these differences, hopefully to become a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. A lot of us probably tried to do things in a comfortable way last year, but we became uncomfortable. I believe if you start things uncomfortable, you'll tend to become more comfortable later. A great example is that exercise. A lot of times, exercising, you're uncomfortable at first, but the results are you become more comfortable. And help you to see some maybe personal applications and do a lot of question Q&A afterwards at the end on how you can maybe apply some of these things specifically for you. And so when I started out, I was interviewing Joanne and telling her about like, hey, what were all the things that it made her feel? And I use this illustration. In 2020, you might have felt like, you just took whatever the world gave you and you try to make good with it. And I liken that to maybe a bad suit or maybe a bad pair of heels. So I'll use a pair of heels example for Joanne, not for myself. Joanne, did you ever walk in a bad pair of shoes? You maybe thought it was a great deal on sale and you bought it and then you wore it and you're like, man, I just don't want to wear this anymore.
Yeah, it hurts. Not very sustainable on your feet when you buy, well, for me at least.
Mm-hmm. And then, so how would you say that was equivalent to like your experience going through like 2019 and into 2020?
I would say similar. I was trying to be the next flashy thing or just kind of going with everyone else's trend in a way. Even though in my core, like I knew this was something I wanted to do, but it wasn't 100% me. It was like 50% me and then 50% what everyone else was telling me to do in a sense. Yeah, so that's how I would relate it to the shoes.
Mhm.
The shoes are too big or just doesn't fit right.
Yeah. It wasn't for you, right? You were trying to get take advantage of a deal or take advantage of something, and you try to fit the shoes rather than the shoes fitting you, right? And maybe for work, right, like you're just taking whatever opportunities that you were trying to make it fit, and not necessarily making sure that the opportunity was a fit for you. And I know a lot of people at work do that, and I think some of the greatest single people accomplishers are those that make things fit because they're so doable, they're so capable, they have so many talents that they can make anything work. But unfortunately, what happens over time is if you have to do everything yourself, you have a hard time making it work yourself. And then it's hard for you to lead other people to get it to fit them. And so what happens, and I found most people are, they just feel like they're on their backs. They feel defeated. You know, they know the fight is still going because the 10 count hasn't happened, but secretly inside, they wish that could be all over. And they're fighting, should I get up? Should I stay down? Should I get up? I stay down. And so, Jenny, when it came to you making some big transitions in your life, what was the thing that helped you decide that I was going to stay down and then come back into this fight a little bit differently?
Well, what got me to stay down was I didn't want to get hit again. It's safer to stay down. But then, yeah, I just didn't want to stay down there for too long because I didn't feel like I had control of my life. Like I was just doing what everyone else wanted me to do.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, especially my parents. So I was like, no, maybe it is time to get up and then just figure it out how to not get hit so hard.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
That's good. And and a term that we use is called self-preservation, right? Like if you're constantly being dominated over and over again, there's going to be a point in time where you can't take that challenge anymore, and you're like, whatever, give up, right? But then it's about working smarter, not harder, right? Um, I'll give an example. When I was growing up, I lived in this house in Culver City, and it was my parents' first house. And there are a lot of things about the house I didn't like. The sun came in the wrong way, and so therefore it caused a lot of condensation on the walls. And I grew up with a lot of mold on my walls. It had for those of you in real estate, you'll know what's it like to have a not a central heating system. We just had a little wall furnace that we had to do with the whole house. And my parents, being a little cheap, they would never turn it on, so we were always freezing, you know, every winter because it wasn't an efficient use of energy, and it just didn't fit. You know, the bedrooms were small, it was a little disjointed, and I just felt like every day I was fighting myself living in that house. Now, about in 2006, I had a chance to buy it, so I bought it. But the first thing I did was I demolished the whole house pretty much, right? Except for like two walls. And then I redesigned it the way I wanted it to be. And so this is like a design of my house, the way I wanted it. When I woke up, the sun was where I wanted it. When I wanted to go to the restroom, it was where I wanted it. When I had friends coming over and I was hosting events, everything was laid out so everybody could interact with each other, and there were no walls or barriers, so I could have a great event. And I felt like finding the house was serving me, not me basically trying to fit into the house. And so we go back to the suit analogy and the shoes analogy, right? Like, let's let's take the time to make the circumstances around us so we can work in it in a thriving way, not in a way that we're barely surviving. And when we do that, what you'll find is you'll be actually the person on top. You'll feel like you're conquering your goals. You'll feel energized at the end of the fight because you've hit what you wanted to do, and you know that you didn't get hit trying to do what you're trying to do. And so those are some of the things that we want to do. Establish your baseline. What is the environment around you that you have to create in order for you to be successful? Some of you, when you get a new job, you go into the office, like, oh, I'm going to put my pens here. I'm going to put my laptop here. I'm going to set up my monitor over there. And that's the way I'm going to want to work. You might have other coworkers that are staring at you like, what? Why would you want to put that there? Doesn't matter. It works. Now, it took some time to set it up. It wasn't probably easy. It was probably painstaking. You probably had some adjustments that you had to take. But if you take the time to prepare your workplace, the workplace will work for you. So I want everybody to take a moment and establish your own baseline. And I have some things to help you to figure that out. But there are things that are what we say natural strengths that as you do it, you don't even have to do it with thinking about it. And in fact, you could do it all day long and it'll be energizing for you. And then there are things that you do that are like what we say learned behaviors. There are things that you have to think about in order for you to do. And it's kind of draining, right? One way to look at this is like if you are right-handed, everything you do with your right hand is more naturally energizing for you, especially when you're eating something that's very good. If you were to use your left hand to eat and you're right-handed, it will be very tough for you to do. It will be draining. You have to think about every single move that you do. I've had surgery on my right arm 4 times, right? 3 on my elbow, 1 on my shoulder. And so I've learned how to become pretty good left-handed about doing things. I could eat probably ramen with chopsticks and not get it all over my shirt. But that's not how I started, right? I had to learn how to use my left hand a little bit incrementally. It was really draining. It was really conscious. And as I did it though, I was able to set myself for success because the 3rd surgery and the 4th surgery, I was able to use my left hand to eat and it wasn't a problem. In fact, now it's to the point where when I go to places to eat and I'm the right-hander sitting against the wall and my right hand, I can't have a lot of mobility. I'll just put my chopsticks in my left hand and I'll kind of reach out and get whatever I want. Or if my wife is on my right side and I want to reach out to get something over there and I don't want to put my arm in front of her face, I'll actually put my chopsticks on my left hand and I'll be able to reach over without, being rude to her. And those are some of the things that I've learned to embrace some of the things that are learned behaviors and use them intentionally and not rely too much on the behaviors that I'm really naturally good at. Because all of us tend to go to the things that we're really good at and want to use that as our first choice. But that becomes subconscious behavior that is not intentional. We're not thinking about the end result we're trying to do and realizing, is that the best way to go? So if you could take a moment and do some personal inventory on things that you tend to do in a go-to way, but also instead of just falling for your own trap, take a moment to say, hey, is there a different way to do things that might be better for yourself and your goals or the organization's goals? So I'll put some examples here, and each one of those colors are opposites of each other. See if you could find the ones that you like to do, and then maybe you'll find some ones on the other side of that gray line that drive you nuts. For example, some people like to talk things aloud in order to understand them, right? Like for me, I like to say things and try to figure things out as I go and I make up stuff, But other people like to guard their thoughts until they're almost perfect. So this one would be like, these tend to be what extroverts like to do. And these are things that introverts tend to like to do. That's one way to look at it. So look at this column. Like sometimes you might, like my wife, she drives me nuts. Like I'm constantly asking, like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Let's talk aloud. Let's try to plan this together. She's like, I don't know. I'm just like thinking. And I know she's got like 20 million things in her mind, but she doesn't feel comfortable sharing until it's something that she's ready to give and it's perfected in a way. Some of you might enjoy the challenge of doing theoretical stuff. You don't want to really talk about the tangibles, but like ideating, it would be so amazing if everybody was able to, put their information into a website and then all the people that they hated dating, they would rate them. Wouldn't that be so awesome, right? And then people can date safely. We'll call that an app, safedate.com or something, right? But nobody wants to actually do the dirty work of having to code all that, figure out all the legal bylaws of putting people's pictures, slander, like nobody likes to think about. So some of you are on the right-hand side of here, or some of you on the left-hand side of here. But go through this a little bit and see if you can make a list for yourself on which ones tend to be energizing for you naturally, and which ones tend to be more draining for you. And I bet most of you tend to do it that way first, naturally, instead of learning to appreciate the other way of doing things and seeing if maybe the other process might be a better way of doing it, right? So, as you take a look and you're starting to realize, wow, I didn't realize the way I do it is totally opposite from the way other people do it. You're starting to see some of those ways of how you prefer to do things. And that's your baseline. Is your baseline of operations the best way to always do something without being intentional about it? And so if you look at your life and I would say, hey, what % of your life and the things that you do you tend to do it in a way that is energizing to you? And what are some ways that you tend to do it that is just draining to you? Some of you might look like this. 90% of the way I tend to do things and how I start things are just really energizing. They play on my natural strengths. It's the way I want to do it. And maybe 10% of the things, I've learned the hard way to do things differently. So I tend to do things in a more conscious way, do things the way like I have to do it. And it's kind of draining. Now, Joannie, when you're looking back at 2019, what do you think your natural way of starting things off was? Did you tend to do things in the way that you prefer to do things, or did you tend to do things the way you had to do things?
I tend to do things because I have to do it. So
Okay.
this 90-10, I think it would be like more like 30-70, like swapped.
Okay. So maybe your picture looked a little closer to this, right? And why was that? Why were you spending most of your time doing things that you didn't want to do or you didn't like doing and not really getting energy from the work that you're doing?
I was just told to do it that way. So I didn't know what my true strengths were that energizes me. So I just kind of went along with what the manager or the organization expected of me.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when you realized your life was over and over again, kind of at this disproportion, right? Like, is that how you started to realize maybe this isn't the work that you want to do moving forward?
Yeah, and as much as it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you look at the way most people tend to be, down on the mats, you're beat up, it's because most likely they've been operating on their learned behavior more. They didn't realize maybe the role that they had or the company that they were going to work for was going to ask them to do things more on the things that challenged them. And they maybe didn't even realize that this work that they're asking me to do is going to be something that I'm not naturally good at. Maybe I was really good at it because I practiced really hard. For me, when I was going to college, it was like, hey, I thought I was good at math and science, so I'm going to go into engineering. I was good at it, but it was because I worked really hard at it. It wasn't because I was naturally good. And over time, as you get older, you subconsciously tend to do things that are going to be gravitating more towards your natural strengths than your learned behaviors. And if you don't have an understanding of your baselines, then you don't understand whether or not the work you want to do is going to allow you to reassess your skill sets and how they're being used into what we call the 70-30 principle. And what we want people to realize is like, hey, our goal isn't to get you to 100% of the things that you do are going to use your natural strengths. And our goal isn't necessarily to be zero at the things that are draining you. But in fact, what we want you to do is pick how you can do the work overall using your 70%, so that you have the opportunity to grow and learn the things and have the bandwidth for the challenges that come along the way. So most business owners, they had to be the jack of all trades and do everything. And it's up to the point where you're wearing a lot of hats, and then this 30% gets really heavy. And then they realize, what, I can't do it. So I'm going to give away some of the roles that I have. And so most of the times most business owners hire the first people on the jobs that they don't want to do. And that might be great that you finally let go of that. But then what you might have done, though, is kind of throw something away without doing this intentionally. And what you might realize is you didn't take the time to train properly the person that's going to take over. It's an important role. It might not be as important as some of the other things that only you can do, but it's important, right? And so what happens is when you have your 70-30 off, and you might have grown your business too fast, what happens is most businesses fail because they gave away the part that they didn't do because they had to, and they didn't take the time to train those people well. So if you're leading a business or you're leading a company and a startup, then one of the things you want to do is like take the time to grow your business so that you're in 70-30. Things always happen. You might have like new laws that come into play. You might have new regulations that are happening. You might have something like COVID hit you. And if you don't have a good 70-30 balance, then you're not going to be able to absorb the challenges that only you can deal with. And then you're going to feel frustrated and then that you can't do the job that you need to do. So as you look at this 30-70 principle, look at yourself and maybe rate yourself. Take a moment, think about, and in the chat box, where would you say is your 70-30 principle? What is your percentage and how are you trending? Would you say that you're at, maybe 60-40, but you're trending towards 70-30? Are you at 50-50, but you're trending towards 20-70? What would you say is the balance that you're at? And go ahead and throw it in the chat box so we can get a little bit of an assessment of where we are. But while we do that, Joanne, why don't you share, like, where would you say your current 70-30 is?
My current one, I'm at 65-35.
Okay.
And it's intentional. So there are some weeks where I know I'm going to be on the 60-40. But it's just because I realize there's certain work that has to be done, even though I don't want to do it. But then I also balance it out with things that I do love to do, which is network with you guys.
Good. So then when you're at 65-35 and it's always trending towards 70-30, what are some things that you're discovering that having that 70-30 has empowered you to be able to do?
I actually get to spend more time doing what I like to do, which is just being in the community and helping the community grow as individuals and as a whole. But then I also realized that the 30%, I do find the right players for it. But there's certain things that I look for that I'm like, I know this needs to be done. I don't like to do it. It doesn't drain me, but I'm going to find somebody that's good at it. And then from there, we just kind of meet halfway.
Good. And so what we're trying to do is get you to like 70-30. I see a lot of good numbers. There's some 80-20s. There's 60-40s. Hopefully, Noelle, that's because it's going better. Not that it went worse as she's working. I've been working with her. But the idea is like, can we get to doing things that are going to be energizing and at least try to get to 70%, but know that some things might come in over time. It's going to give you the bandwidth. Some people just say, no, I don't want to do it. I can't do it. And they become resistant people. And some of your employees might be that way, right? And we need to help them to realize that, hey, if they're in the wrong job because they don't have the bandwidth to do things differently, they might not be the best person for your company. And those are some difficult decisions that you have to make. But you could use this 70-30 principle for yourself, as well as the people on the team, to see if they're the right people for the right job. And as we look at the different ways that people lead themselves and make those decisions, the 70-30 principle is helping you to see like, hey, is the work that I do something that I'm naturally good at? Or is that something that I was taught to be or taught to do? Is this a job where the vision and mission is really exciting for me, but the day-to-day activities to do that, it's not really exciting to me? Like, you're going to have to make that assessment for yourself. Where is that leadership behavior? And our hope is that instead of being forced to do things a certain way because somebody told you to do it a certain way, that's your nurture, or that you want to do it that way because that's your nature, we want you to be intentional in your leadership behaviors to make a choice. We want them to be conscious of the outcome that you're trying to do. You don't want to just reach into the toolbox and just grab whatever tool that might work for you or is your favorite tool to use. We want you to take a moment and take a look at the actions that you do and get a conversation with the people around you, your employees, your managers, or your coworkers and colleagues, to hear how they do things. And when you hear people doing things differently, don't reject it. Don't be like, hey, I'm just going to stay on my 100% zero. No, listen to what they have. See if there's something that they're tapping on your 30% to do, and learn how to work smarter, not necessarily harder in what you accomplish. And so if you were asked, what kind of a leader are you? When people say like, they're either your partner, so they live with you, maybe they work with you, or they're people that you lead. If you look at the 30-70 principle, it might help you to realize that people might answer you that you're either really tough to work with or you're really friendly. Those are different things that come off based on your 70-30 principle. So Joanne, if I were to ask you, last year, or in 2 years ago, what type of a leader are you? Let's start a little personal. What would you say your husband would say? What kind of a leader are you to live with?
Um, People pleasing. I don't
Okay.
know. Just keep the harmony. But I like to talk a lot, so I'm very chitter chatter.
Okay. You're a people-pleasing leader that probably says things to make other people feel happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, fill the space. I'm sure there's some other people might resonate with that. I would say that that's probably a lot like me as well. What about the people that you actually had to work with?
Oh man, definitely. I'm almost like what they call a yes woman. So anything they want, I just say yes to it.
Hmm.
To them.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually got that comment before.
And then maybe at NAP, how would you say that the people that you lead, how would they describe you?
um, I think a mix of the supporting them, but then at the same time, I'm fighting for the community's mission and the organization mission. So there is going to be a little bit of that pushback when something just doesn't fit right with what we're doing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Good. It's glad that you know that, right? Because then that helps you to see your baseline in terms of how you lead other people. So we'll use a 30-70 principle and apply it in a leadership practice that some of you might not realize that you do. And this will also help you to see what other people experience on the other side of you. So we call this like the support challenge matrix. And when it comes to people, believe it or not, 50% of the world naturally support how other people feel. And 50% of the world naturally challenge how people feel because they want to get the work done. So for example, I would say you tend to be a supporter if you care more about how people feel than the goals at work. And then you're a challenger to people's feelings if you think more about the work's goals than you do how people feel. So think about it, right? And maybe you can self-assess yourself. Are you more naturally a supporter of people? Or are you naturally more of a challenger of people? And a lot of those that are challengers of people, it's not to say that you naturally like to challenge people, but something behind you, you tend to say, hey, when push comes to shove, the work needs to get done. And some of you might be like, hey, when push comes to shove, I'll do the work for them because you care more about how people feel. That's probably how it comes off. So Joanna, based on your answers, I would say you were probably more of a supporter, right? Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then what was it like for you to be on the opposite side of maybe a challenger, someone that tends to challenge?
It's uncomfortable. Um, yeah, it's uncomfortable because I don't feel the support from them. Even though their intentions might be there, but it just comes off differently. Um, yeah.
So I'm going to put in the chat box, which do you tend to do? And give a moment, if you're shy, feel free to not put that in there, but which do you tend to do? Sunny tends to be a supporter. She wants to be more of a challenger needed at time. And by the way, I don't know, Sunny, what your pronoun is, so I apologize if I'm wrong. Marianne, support. Richard, support 100%. Yeah. And so what happens is our natural bias and our natural 70-30 baseline, if you tend to be a supporter, there are things that you're going to do that challengers as their baseline is going to naturally be in conflict with, and you're going to have a hard time being able to work with other people, right? So for example, I'm going to give you this exercise and we'll break out again for 5 minutes. But if you are naturally a supporter or naturally a challenger, you're going to naturally fall into one of these two camps, right? And so if you're naturally someone that supports, then what happens is people around you are going to feel like you're someone that likes to bring the support, but struggles when challenge needs to happen for those that lead. And then the opposite is going to be the case for those that challenge, right? When you bring a lot of challenge, but you have a tendency to have empathy, have a hard time providing empathy for those that need a little bit more support. And then, so those are some of the question that you're gonna have. And so I'll break you up, take, 5 minutes to really just talk that through, and then see what your baseline tends to do for the people that you have. All right. So we'll break this up. We'll come back in about 5 minutes and we'll see you then. All right. So welcome back. I had to cut the room a little short. I'm sorry to make your friendships not as long, and be able to to build deeper relationships. But I was hoping that you could just realize, as we close up here, it's 1 o'clock, that if you have a bias towards being a supporter or a challenger, then there's a tendency to fall into, if you bring these together, to either create a culture where people are going to feel entitled around you because you're really supportive. That means people feel like they can get away with things more than they would. And so rules aren't followed and people feel like you can break the rules. But if you're naturally more of a challenger and you don't provide support, well, the rule is going to feel like those are more important than people. And people will tend to operate out of fear and feel manipulated because you're going to use the rules as a way to get people to do things that they want. And what the 70-30 principle allows you to do is, if you can lean in and have bandwidth to provide 30% of the other, meaning like if you're naturally a supporter, you can provide 30% more challenge in your life. Or if you're naturally a challenger, lead with more support. You'll find that people around you get the empowerment they need and see things as an opportunity to try something. And you'll find a lot more success in the people that you lead. And so when we went through all those different ways of doing things, these are just examples of ways that you could become more of a liberator. So if you tend to do things another way, and that's the only way to do it, then you probably feel entitled to do things another way. But you'll probably find liberation trying things and giving yourself some bandwidth to accomplish things in a different way. And vice versa. If you like to do things on this side and it's challenging for you to do this way, lean in and allow your leadership to grow by being able to become a liberator that allows you to not create entitlement or fear around you, but provide support. But it's important, right, to get your baseline. Like, start trying to get more of a 70-30 balance, and it'll allow you to be more successful